Mental health is probably the most pervasive health problem that modern civilization faces. Mental illnesses like schizophrenia and epilepsy have always been recognized, but now there is a wide range of syndromes, all described as mental illness. These conditions have always been with us. Since the beginning of time, conditions such as depression and anxiety have been described, but it's only recently that they've been considered to be abnormal. Modern-day living is much more complicated than it has ever been, and the causal factors of mental disturbances can also be very complicated as compared to the past. It is common knowledge that taking medications for any kind of mental disturbance creates a lifetime of dependency and never cures the problem, only suppresses it. CCHR International, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, has the statistics on the prolific, indiscriminate use of mind-altering drugs in the US. Approximately 25% of the entire population are taking legally prescribed psychotropic drugs. And typically what happens in the States soon becomes the norm everywhere else. Of particular concern is the use of drugs in babies and children who cannot choose otherwise. They are given medications simply because they are difficult to manage or there isn't time to deal with them. It's an appalling situation. These drugs are extremely difficult to get off, and giving them to the developing mind is not only damaging, but creates a lifetime of dependency. Currently, there is no alternative to this approach for those who are in the modern system. In this talk, I am proposing an integrated system using Ayurveda, yoga, and related counseling as a first line of treatment. If this is not effective, or if the patient doesn't comply, only then resort to psychotropic drugs on a limited basis. To fully understand what I'm about to describe, it is advisable to visit the website www.ataytv.com and familiarize yourself with the principles of Ayurveda and yoga, particularly the videos and blogs on mental health. Ayurveda and yoga are sister sciences. Ayurveda, the science of life, and yoga, the science of consciousness. These sciences began their evolution thousands of years ago with the rishis, the sages of the ancient world. They are the sciences of body, mind, and spirit being interconnected, and must not be confused with religion, which evolved much later in history. This knowledge is called the Vedas, and I am going to describe the Vedic view of the mind and how we can use this knowledge to manage the multitude of mental issues manifesting in all ages, in all walks of life, in every race, creed, and color throughout the world today. Modern psychiatrists, psychologists, analysts, therapists practice on the basis of theories of experts like Freud, who explain human behavior. It can be proven which part of the brain is responsible for what behavior, emotion, or feeling. However, Western psychology is limited because it only goes to the level of the mind. Furthermore, it can only use the mind with which to study it. But in Vedic psychology, because of its understanding of spirituality, we are able to detach from the mind and study it objectively. Therefore, the Vedas give us a better explanation of why each individual behaves, feels, and reacts the way they do. The Vedic view of the mind considers the brain as an instrument of the mind and every cell in the body and mind as having its own intelligence. It also recognizes the subtle body, which can roughly be described as energy forces which connect us to cosmic consciousness. These forces cannot be measured, but are the forces described in theories of quantum healing. Vedic philosophy describes 6 levels of the mind. The first is the senses, which are the bridges between the outside world and the mind. They are the instruments through which we experience the world through the 5 elements. Hearing uses the ears to experience space through which sound is carried. Touch uses skin to experience air. Sight uses the eyes to experience the fire element. Taste uses the tongue for water, and smell uses the nose to experience the earth element, which consists of all 5 elements. What comes into the mind through the senses is critical to mental stability. Everything that the mind is exposed to is food, and it can have either a positive or a negative effect. People dealing with mental health issues must understand the importance of controlling sensory material. Information comes through the senses to manos, the sensory mind. We mostly operate at this level through passive activities, entertainment, and so on. It's like the screen of the computer, only capable of observing, but unable to process and store information. The next level is buddhi, or conscious mind, which can be compared to the processor of the computer. It is the misuse of buddhi which causes both mental and physical illness. In other words, when we choose to do something or eat something against our nature and better judgment, we get sick. This is called pragyaprada in Ayurveda, or the misuse of intelligence. What sets humans apart from other living beings is this intelligence, meaning we can make choices and are not driven by instinct as other creatures are. The choices we make daily ultimately affect health and well-being, and because we can, we will always choose according to the desires of the mind. The Vedas say that the most difficult thing is to control the mind, and our aim in life should be to master it. Chitta is the subconscious mind and can be compared to the computer hard drive or memory. It is where all life's experiences and those of previous lives are stored. When we recall something, we bring it from the subconscious into the sensory mind where we can see it. Intelligence protects the subconscious, so it must be used properly and with awareness. Therefore, we must understand its function. Negative stimulants, impressions, sex and violence coming from advertising, movies, and the internet and so on, all play to the desires of the mind. Intelligence is not developed in babies and young children, which means that the subconscious is wide open and not protected. So if the child has a traumatic experience or isn't loved, then the impressions or samskaras, which are like scars, will be impregnated on the subconscious and will affect the person for the rest of their life. It isn't necessary to know the cause of these scars, and chanting mantra on a daily basis can remove them from the subconscious, rather like cleaning off a mirror so that we can see. Vedic psychology recognizes ahamkara, or ego, as the self-conscious mind, which gives all living beings a sense of identity. Everything has to have this feeling in order to exist. Modern psychology doesn't recognize this sense of I, nor does it understand where the feeling of I comes from, because it only studies the brain, and there isn't a part of the brain where the sense of I can be pinpointed. The unanswered question, who is this person who has these feelings, always remains. The Vedas recognize the ego as a waypoint where we make the choice between believing that I am this body and mind, or I am the inner self, which is the real me, or the embodied soul. When we recognize that we are not body and mind, we are able to be objective in viewing ourselves and our behavior, and are able to change. When we make the choice to connect to our spiritual self and go beyond the mind, we can see it and therefore control it. This is Vedic psychology, and is why its understanding of the mind is so important to mental health today.